I'm going to now introduce the topic, which is, are there alternatives to the solo competitive path? And I want to firstly introduce my colleague here, who's actually my business sister, Tomar Levine. Now, she's an amazingly gifted woman who's able to tune into people's Akashic records. And she does readings for people about their business and intuitive business strategizing. She's an amazingly intuitive person who's able to see the bird's eye view of humanity and what we're going through right now. So I've learnt an immense amount from her, and I really look forward to merging our different knowledge bases and our different perspectives today for you all. And over to you, Tomar.
Well, thank you, Natalie. So, and I have also learned so much and continue to learn so much from my amazing business sister, Ned Lee Kent, who is just so brilliant and so innovative and so such an open receptacle for what the universe wants to pour down through her. She creates systems and models and really powerful new visions. She's basically dedicated to sacred business and to helping people embody their soul work and create businesses that are aligned with nature and so much more. You're going to hear about some of her innovative ideas on this call, as a matter of fact, because the topic that we have today is something that I have learned a lot about from Natalie. So when Natalie and I first met about a year ago, and we realized that we had a lot in common. We shared really strong feelings about what is not right in the business world and the business model that we've been taught. We share a vision of how we believe the world should be, and that it's the world that we envision is one that really is more in alignment with the principles of nature and more in accord with what we both call true abundance, which means the flow of energy that flows through the world and that sustains all of us when we surrender to it, when we're in tune with it, rather than the way our society has developed an approach to what we call abundance based on greed, on fear, on scarcity, on separation, on mistrust and competition. So Natalie's vision and mine were very much in sync. And one of the chief principles that we agreed upon is that humans are supposed to live and work together. We're supposed to work together, live together in community. That is the natural way we were designed. It's actually our inner template. And it partakes of what we both love, which is the ecosystem model of how nature allows all separate species and individuals to thrive through interconnection and through mutual support and mutual communication. We're not meant to live and work in isolation, so and that is the basis of true abundance, but it's also the basis of what we're going to be talking about today. So the trend our world has taken has really been in the opposite direction, not towards community, not towards alignment and co-creation and mutual support, but towards isolation, separation, competition, and desire to survive and get ahead through pushing others aside and having more and more for me. That is the ideal in our capitalist society. So we've moved to such a state of hyper-individualism that, for instance, in New York City, where I live, they say that half the people who live here live the way I live, which is alone in four walls. I have more than four walls, but basically in a box separate from other people. And that's true of most big cities in our world today. And in business, so those of us who are interested in sharing our gifts with the world, who feel called, who feel that we have a purpose, And we want to do that, through sharing our unique inspiration. We're basically taught to become something called a solopreneur. We're not really offered any other alternative. It's if we don't want to work for a company, then you're going to be in business for yourself. And this is considered to be a really wonderful thing, and it is, because we can, be creative. We can give our own unique gifts, develop our soul work. We can create our own structure and lifestyle, all of that. But somehow it's been completely relegated to this term solo. And when I asked a business advisor many, many years ago, like, why does it have to be this way? It's so hard. I know that's an interesting question. I guess most people wanted to escape from corporate, and the opposite of corporate is working for yourself, and they feel it's freedom. I said, well, it doesn't feel like freedom to me. It actually feels like a very huge burden to me. So, but it's so taken for granted that no alternative is ever mentioned. And that was true until I met Natalie, because we both discovered that we share this dislike for the solo path. And but Natalie took it a step further, and she actually came up with some alternatives, because, as I said, she's very innovative. And the two alternatives that Natalie really created the vision for, or received the download for, she calls a business ecosystem and a business family. So you're going to be hearing more about that later in the call. But we also recognize that a lot of our colleagues and a lot of our clients were also suffering from the same thing, frustrated. And so we actually decided, with two other people who are part of our business family, to co-create a home in the online business world that would be an oasis for people who are tired of trying to fit into a model that doesn't fit us. And this home that we are creating has as its principles financial sanity instead of inflated promises about get rich, get rich, get rich, simple solutions instead of exhausting complexity, and collaboration instead of only solo, alienating isolation. So these are the principles that were actually founded this membership group that we're going to be bringing out soon on. We call it the True Abundance Oasis, or DAO. And later you're going to be hearing more about that. But today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics, collaboration versus the solo path. Natalie.
Yes, I love all the context you've provided, because it's so relevant, because a lot of people are operating in business in a particular way without questioning why they're operating that way. Or if they are questioning it, they're not sure what else exists. And so that's what we want to do today, is offer some alternatives to get some brainstorming happening. And we really invite you to ask your curly questions about this topic. What's worked for you with collaboration? What hasn't? What are some of the barriers that you're finding in your own work to collaboration? So we're starting with the first question, which is, what are the assumptions and expectations embedded in the term solopreneur, and what are their human costs? So we're really starting from the macro perspective. Why is humanity operating in this way, and what are the consequences? Because often because we see this as the mode of operation that everyone's following, we don't actually recognize what the consequences are. And so one of the things which is quite fresh for me, is I actually published an article this week called "What Happens When Business Becomes About Fame." And I wrote this because I hear it so often, and I see it so often in the business world, where money and fame are so intertwined, and people are either seeking money or they're seeking fame, or both, and so often unconsciously. So people can be creating products and services and thinking of, I'm really helping people, but they don't realize that it's actually coming from the need, the desire, the urgency to make profit, or to be recognized, to be widely recognized by people and become famous in some sense, to have people follow them. And in a world where it's very easy to have people follow you these days in the online world, there's a lot of people putting stuff out there, putting content out there and promoting themselves, and they're actually wasting people's time because they're just trying to be recognized. They're trying to be famous. They're trying, being the operative word, to make money. And they're missing the point. They're losing the purity and the sacredness of their work, of their soul work, when money and profit and fame start to override them, overtake them. And I'll give a great example is, people producing videos that, is really just to gain people's attention. They're not thinking about, am I actually providing absolute value for every word I'm speaking and every minute of that person's life that I'm taking up right now? And sorry to rain on the millennials parade, but the millennials are shocking at this. They do really, really long videos and take 10 times as long to make a point. And I think some of it is actually because YouTube rewards you for having more minutes on your videos. So the longer the videos, the more money you make. But this is how insidious our culture is about how easy it is to be driven by money or fame. We are rewarded for fame. It actually supports our livelihood. And so it's diluting the integrity of our work. And the integrity of our work is what is needed to change this world and create the new economy. So the other point I wanted to make about this, another human cost, which is more personal, is that when we are doing our work to be recognized or to be famous or make money, we actually require more effort, more energy to succeed. So this is why when people are creating their businesses from ego, this ego drive, that they need big systems, big marketing campaigns, expensive coaches and consultants. They're spending heaps of money on marketing to succeed. There's so much push and excess energy that's required for them to succeed. Rather than, and we'll talk about more of this later, but we also touched on it in the last call, rather than going with the flow, the natural flow of the creative life force that supports us in this world, true abundance, going with the creative life force of your own soul, which knows how you'll be supported in this world, and using that in genuine service to other people. So there are two very distinct camps here, and the juggernaut, the industries that we are all working in, are mostly focused on fame and money. That's how they're actually being fueled. So the ego gets its rocks off very, very easily in business in the conventional mainstream world. So we are here, Tomar and I are here, and with our business family and with all of you today, to create that alternative. And we do have to create it. We have to carve our own way forward. So over to you, Tomar. Yeah, I know you have lots to say on this one. Tomar's got this wonderful big picture view on this question.
Well, yeah, I see that the human cost of the solo path, Natalie, in this wonderful article that she posted on her blog today, really brings out the side of it that has to do with that ego hunger, how it feeds that ego hunger. And actually what happens in the entrepreneurial world is that ego hunger is disguised, and it's framed in language like making a big impact on the world, playing a bigger game, being all that you can be. But, they don't say that that's actually, the purpose is the more people you reach, the more important you feel. So it doesn't match every single person. But the other the other human cost is that it's a very hard path. It's a difficult path. And it's also a lonely path. It's an isolating path. And so the idea of it being a virtue to do something that's hard and that's solitary probably comes from a very masculine archetype that our culture has embraced and elevated, idealized. And it's the archetype of the hero, the solitary hero or the conquering hero. And just to think of it in very pop culture terms, you can think of the Lone Ranger or one of that cowboy image who rides into town, takes care of all the problems, rescues everyone who's in danger, and then rides out again into the sunset alone, except for his horse. So there's this archetype in which we idealize as having superiority, as having power, having autonomy, having independence, and being really at the pinnacle of some kind of being revered. And people project onto this archetype either our desire to be the hero and to be admired and desired by everyone. But notice he's desired, but he's you can't get him. He's an elusive object. Either the desire to be the hero ourselves or the desire to be rescued by that ideal father figure. So this model has actually permeated our culture to a tremendous degree. And it's certainly in business or any kind of story that we have in our culture of success. So one of the things about this model is that it's really a Piscean concept. The Piscean age is passing, and it was the age of hierarchy. And the hierarchy always has somebody at the pinnacle, someone at the top who's a leader or a guru or, the one who has all the power. But we're now moving into the Aquarian age. We're actually in the Aquarian age, and that has a very different energy. That holds a vision of connection and solidarity in which the individual still gets to express their unique brilliance, but as part of the whole, playing a role and making a contribution in which it's like the instruments in an orchestra. You hear every instrument beautifully, but it's because they're making music together that you appreciate them. You don't want to just always hear a solo all the time. So the path of the solopreneur is a kind of a hybrid because it's not necessarily heroic. It's not usually world changing, but it requires this isolation and this trial and suffering and difficulty that the hero must undergo. It partakes of that hero archetype, but the goal is a smaller goal. It's really personal acclaim and achievement. And of course, it's also delivering some kind of benefit to others. I guess that's the cowboy part of cleaning up, the town. But for the most part, this is an illusion. For the most part, doing business this way feels hard, feels lonely, feels stressful, feels isolating. But it's been very imprinted in our psyches from the way it permeates our culture. So I'd like to lead you in a very, very short experience, just a process, to give you an idea of the contrast of what we're talking about. So I just ask you to close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath and just feel yourself, your inner energy. Just imagine that you are an isolated unit in a large space filled with other isolated units. And somewhere up ahead, there's a source of nutrients that you're trying to get to. And you're pushing ahead. You're trying to get there, but then others come in and cut you off. So you try to push harder, and then others push harder. And then there's more coming in from the side. And some of those other units are bigger and stronger and faster than you are. And they just kind of grind you. And you decide to just drop back like you can't compete. You're just going to step aside, let them get ahead. So just feel how that feels. Or you might decide, no, I'm not going to let them get ahead of me. I'm going to really be tough so I can be the winner. So you put on a lot of muscle and speed, and you start surging ahead, and you start pushing away all the other isolated units. You start shoving them and running over them and just obliterating them until you get to the goal and you win and you grab onto it and you have it and the others are looking at you and you're finally safe. So just feel how that feels. Okay. Now just let that whole scenario dissolve and drift away. Just take another breath into your center. And just from your heart, let the energy drop down into your belly, into your spine. And from the base of your spine, let a line of light go down, 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 down into the center of the earth and anchor into the center of the earth. You're connected to Mother Earth, and just allow her to send her energy up through that line of light, filling you with her blessing and her benevolent, loving strength and support. And then let that line of light continue up through your body, up through your heart and your throat and your head, and up through the crown of your head, up, 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 till you reach the center of the galaxy, and you latch on there. And then you connect and open wide and allow the downpouring of the divine light to come down through you. And just notice that you are anchored in the earth and in the heavens, that you are a pole of light bridging heaven and earth, and that you have this column of light that goes right through you, anchoring you securely. Now breathe into your heart and just be aware that just as you are held vertically, you can also be held horizontally, because around you, encircling you, are beings of light, of love, of kindred spirits. Some of them are your colleagues. Some of them are helpers and teachers of yours. Some of them are people that you help and teach. But with all of them, from your heart center, there's a line of light going out horizontally, connecting to all of these beings who are all around you. And around them, another concentric circle and another. And you feel that this line of light that connects you in all directions, horizontally to all the beings in your world who are there to support you and whom you are there to support, is holding you securely in the fabric of life itself. You are held in the fabric of life horizontally, and you are held in the fabric, in the polarity of heaven and earth vertically. And between that vertical line of power and that horizontal line of belonging, that plane of belonging, of inclusion and connection, you are in your rightful place. And that is where you are. No matter where you go on earth, you can travel from place to place. You will always be anchored in the earth and the heaven, and you will always be securely connected to the fabric of life surrounding you. So just notice how that feels. Okay. So those are the choices we have. Which life do we want? So, Natalie, let's move on to question 2.
Thank you, Tomar. That was really beautiful to feel that. Yeah. If anyone has any comments on how their experience was from that experience, we'd love to hear in the chat.
Absolutely.
So, question 2. Are you an entrepreneur or a nontrepreneur? Now, I'm going to let Tomar explain what nontrepreneur is in a moment, because she coined that term. But I just want to mention a couple of things that I've observed about the difference between the two. In the last few years of working with people starting their businesses, I've it's really crystallized for me how entrepreneurship and going the solo path requires a specific core skill set that if you don't have, or you don't have the money to outsource all of those skills, which can be very expensive, then your chances of succeeding past those first couple of years, those very vulnerable toddler years in business, decline significantly. And by this specific skill set, I mean you need to be able to write well, communicate well, or be very appealing on other forms of communication like video, writing copy, writing newsletters, websites, all that kind of stuff. Being able to pull together contractors and seek out contractors and manage contractors to do bits and pieces for you. And you need to be able to manage your finances well, at least to a point, even if you do outsource to a bookkeeper. Manage your investments, how you use the capital money that you have to invest in your business, being very sensible about how you use that money. And I mean, just those few points alone, I've seen so many horror stories about, people going through real hardship where they've spent all their money because they didn't invest it well, and they haven't hired the right contractors, or they really struggle with their marketing, so they're underselling themselves through their branding. So all these things combined are really important for an entrepreneur to have as a core skill set, unless they outsource or unless they have a core team. And the alternative is you take very much longer than a few years to grow your business past the toddler phase. And I've seen people in business hovering at the toddler phase for 10 years or more. And so, it just basically means that if you don't have this core skill set to grow your business, then it's going to be very difficult. And I really have noticed, the two distinct camps of my clients who have this skill set, and some of them are very talented in all of these areas, and they're off and away after I finish working with them. And then there are the others who don't have this core skill set, who may be brilliant at their craft and really have something valuable to offer, but then struggle to get off the ground. And most people reside in this camp. So the people who have the core entrepreneurial skill set are the minority. So there's a lot of shaming in the business world about, what's wrong with you if you can't get your business off the ground and you need to be making a profit by this amount of time and da-da-da. All of these pressures of expectations that we're supposed to be different, something that we're not. And the reality is the majority of people are not that. And another distinct point I wanted to make about entrepreneurs is that the true entrepreneur, and Tomar will talk a bit about this, is one who thinks about money first. So in terms of that, I mean, they think about what the market opportunities are. Where can I make money? They're looking through that lens. They're looking opportunistically in the market, and they're looking for profit margins. That's a true entrepreneur. However, and this is myself included, a lot of people in the spiritual entrepreneur line of work are not motivated by money, do not see their work through this lens of where is the market opportunity. And so that also can lead to failure and, significant loss of funds in the early years if you don't recognize that you're not that way inclined up front. So that leads me over to Tomar, who has an alternative term, the nontrepreneur.
Yeah, thank you. So, it's painful for many of us. And I remember reading in books, like a list of descriptions. Are you an entrepreneur? Do you have the qualities to make a good entrepreneur? And I would say, no. Yes, I have that one. No.
Yeah.
So I came to a realization that the term spiritual entrepreneur, which I still use for the people who are like me and most of us, in the tribe that I'm with, that I still use that term, but that in fact, it dawned on me once, maybe that's an oxymoron. Does spiritual and entrepreneur even go together in the same phrase, in the same concept? And that's what brought me to wonder, okay, what really is an entrepreneur? And classically, an entrepreneur, as Natalie said, is someone who's thinking about how can I make money, how can I make a profit, where does the market have an opening. It's a person who actually is thrilled by the game of business, the competition, and the game of creating business after business and creating new markets and, challenging themselves. It's like that is the fun for them. And, if you want to think on a really high level, think of Richard Branson. I mean, this is not a bad thing to be, but is it most spiritual practitioners or healers or intuitives? And no, it definitely is not. And in fact, until recently, no one used the term entrepreneur for people like us. We said we were in private practice, or we were in business for ourselves, or, there were different terms for it. But entrepreneur is really a Johnny-come-lately in terms of defining us. And I really think that because of what the word means, even if we're not consciously thinking of it, it's influencing most of us to feel inadequate and to feel anxious and to feel like a fraud as well. How many feel like that? So I came up with the term nontrepreneur. And some of the qualities that, spiritual practitioners, those of us who are here to do our soul work, really, that's really the point, and to share our gifts, we actually would just really be happier if we could simply do that and sustain ourselves and not really spend all that much time at the business end or the marketing end. So the paradox is that when we decide that we have to figure out how to be in business, which we do, most of the choices we have about training programs are not designed for people like us. They're really not designed for people who don't care much about money. They are not designed for people who maybe are allergic to technology or just want a quiet, peaceful life, who don't want to keep growing bigger and bigger and develop an empire and become rich and famous. So again, that's where we are heading. My desire in creating a platform in the world is to find the people that are the non-entrepreneurs in this world really don't have a home. And a lot of us have spent our lifetime feeling like we don't fit in the world, let alone do we fit in the business world. So my real longing is to create a home where people who are in that category of spiritual soul gift developers can feel like we have a home and can actually start to develop some ways of sustaining ourselves that don't require us to become somebody we're not, to pretend to want things we really never wanted in the first place, and to feel burdened by the stress of having to learn ways of functioning that do not come naturally to us. So,
well said.
So, question 3. What are some models for cooperation and collaboration in work and life? What are some models, Natalie?
Well, I've been pondering this one for years now because following on from what Tomar said about the difference between entrepreneur and non-entrepreneur, I started to go, well, how does a non-entrepreneur actually become successful? Because the reality of needing money is still there. That doesn't go away. Whether you're driven by it or not, it's still there. So a non-entrepreneur is really suited to using relationships as their currency and creating in teams, in pods, working together to create so that they can stay true to their own skill set without having to diversify into areas that they don't feel confident and will probably never master and may not have the funds to outsource. and actually starting to work in cooperation. So there's a couple of terms that Tomar mentioned before. One is the business family. So what is distinct about a business family is that it's a group of people who come together not to make money, but to create together, and to create something of value, of tangible value in the world, something that means something to them. And it could look like anything. It doesn't have to necessarily mean a lot of money. You know, a lot of cooperatives are like this. But a business family really comes together based on shared values. So there has to be, that becomes kind of like the bedrock of the family, why they're together in the first place, because they agree upon those principles, those virtues to live by. It also means that they share resources as a family would. So, you know, hey, Tomar, do you want my old computer because yours is dying? You know, that kind of thing. Maybe not in our case, hey, Tomar, it's a bit far to ship it. But, you know, that kind of mentality of, well, I have something that might be of value to my family member who is actually my business family member, treating them like they're part of my family. Why not? It also means that we share profits as a family would in some ways, you know. So whatever one person makes as part of that collective or that co-creation that they have together is divided up according to the energy investment, or, you know, however that family decides is fair and reasonable in supporting each other's lives. It's also very much based on just caring for each other. How are you going in business? You know, how are you making money? Are you being looked after? Well? Is there anything that we can help you with? That kind of just a very basic caring attitude that you have for your business family members. And it's also based on equality. So this means that there's no hierarchy. It is purely based on roles. So each person has a role within the group, and they are true to their role, and they don't overstep the lines or the boundaries of their own role, because they know that their role has a very specific function in the group, that if they don't do it well, the family won't function optimally. So it's very much like an ecosystem in nature, where if one species or plant disappears or doesn't function in the way that it's intended, then the whole system starts to modify and break down and possibly doesn't operate optimally anymore. So these are just principles. We're going to talk to a bit more of the practical side in a moment, but, you know, just start thinking about how you operate now in your business. Do you operate this way? And what adaptations can you start to make in this direction if this is what you're feeling called to do? Another key point about collaboration and corporations that are in this vein is that, and this has tripped me up many times, is that the people coming together, so for example, with our group of 4 in our business family, there's 4 people coming together, each with their own agendas and their own view of the world. And then there is a 5th entity that is created, that is the group soul. And the group soul is what each person needs to honor in terms of how you create and what you create. So it no longer becomes about the personal agenda to create something, or what do I want this to be. It actually becomes about something that is impersonal. So the group soul takes, you know, it's like connecting with the soul of your business. How do you bypass your own egos, agendas and desires to honor the higher perspective, the highest potential of that creation? And the other thing is business ecosystems. So as I mentioned before, ecosystems operate very differently to how most businesses do, because businesses are about self-interest. Primarily, that's what they've had to be in our economy to survive. A business ecosystem also has self-interest, but it is interdependent. It recognizes that my self-interest is serving the whole, and I have to do my part in order for this whole operation to thrive. And if I don't do my part, if I want to have a lazy day, then the system suffers. And if I do more than my part, or I do an inferior job, then the system suffers. And it's about creating lateral relationships. So like Tomar mentioned before, is really creating networks with your colleagues as well as your clients, as well as your mentors, and starting to think as part of a network. And I should mention about the ecosystem concept. What allows an ecosystem to function well is it actually has it has a boundary. So it is not just, we're not talking about endless connections here. So I know you, who knows who, you know, and it goes on and on and on. This one has a defined boundary so that the people within the ecosystem are literally supporting each other. They're not just supporting outside and beyond the system. So it is contained in a sense. And that's what, you know, along the lines of creating this true abundance oasis is about, is we do have to have closed doors for many reasons, but, you know, that is a very important one. Ecosystems function well and can be self-supporting when they have a boundary, a defined boundary. So I'll now pass over to you, Tomar, because you've got lots of good ideas about this as well.
Thank you, Natalie. I particularly appreciate your point about the business family serving a higher thing, which is the soul of the entity itself, the family, whatever its purpose is, or it could be a business if that's the purpose, if that's the form it takes. And, you know, what that speaks to is that really what we're moving into with these models is really a new paradigm, a paradigm for the future that we are embodying now. We are really bridging that gap by learning how to embody some models that really are coming through, just like that came through Natalie. I would say came from the future, or it came from the evolutionary impulse of the higher consciousness of what wants to emerge in the world. And that's something we can do very much when we come together. We can do it individually as well, being receptive to something that wants to emerge. But in my experience, when people come together for a shared purpose and are really willing to open to be guided by what wants to emerge, it can be very powerful. And it's really what we're in the middle of right now. I just wanted to mention a few things that are really basic. One is that humans are primates. Primates do everything in groups. Primates do everything in tribes. So as primates, on the deepest unconscious biological cellular level, we are wired not for isolation, but for shared functioning and mutual support. That's how primates survive and thrive, mutual support. There's also this myth about survival of the fittest coming from nature, and it's a real misinterpretation, thinking that to be tough is what it takes to survive, to compete, to have an edge over the competition. But in fact, scientists have recently come to the realization that it's more the opposite. Those who survive best and who get their genes to go on into the future are the ones who know how to be nice to their neighbors and how to cooperate. It's about cooperation that really is the basis of survival. So it's the survival of the most cooperative, in fact, that most often is the true key to success in this world. And as I said, we're in transition now between the Piscean and the Aquarian age, between the old paradigm and the new. There's a new world coming into being. And those of us who are really identify with that, who know we've been called into this world to partake, to share, to help move things forward, you know, raise the consciousness and so forth, bring the global shift about. I call that being on the transition team. We signed up, we volunteered to be on the transition team on planet Earth. And it's not easy because we are in between paradigms, basically, which means we have to still live in the old paradigm. We still have to earn money somehow or find our way in some way to sustain our bodies, because our bodies live in the three-dimensional world. So that's why, this whole, those of us who are sensitive and who don't feel like we were able to fit and thrive in the old way, we tend to make it our fault and think there's something wrong with us, when in fact, in my view, it's something very right with us, because it shows that we came here as heralds from the future. We're actually ahead of our time, and we came here to be embodiments of something which is emerging into the world. And so it is not an easy job, because we have to overcome our own wounds about all of that, how the world has made us feel inadequate for not fulfilling that old model. And yet we have the opportunity to really open to the vision and to step into it. So that is why, what we're doing in Tao is so exciting, because it is about embodying something that's a cross between the present and the future, which is how we're going to bring it into reality. So the question is, well, what are some of the ways that we can now start to integrate collaboration in our business? How can we begin? What are some of the ways? Do you want to address it, Natalie?
Yeah, following on from what you said, Tomar, it's really important to remember this, that we're creating something that doesn't exist yet. So, people might be looking for alternative models and wanting something really concrete. So tell me how to do it. But it doesn't exist. We have to create it, because we have to change our internal wiring, so to speak, in order to create this. And to find these new ways and these new models and what they look like in practice. And the reason I say this is because, I've had a lot of stabs at collaboration over the last few years, some successful, but most unsuccessful. And one thing I've learned is that it's taken me time to learn the skills of collaboration, that they don't exist in me yet. I'm having to learn a completely new skill, like walking from scratch. I've never been taught this. I've only been taught how to function in a hierarchy in an organization, which is very clear cut and very much based on separation. So I feel like I'm, back in preschool having to learn these new skills. And so that is why the models don't exist yet, because people are still operating from separation, primarily trying to get rich, trying to get famous, making money the priority, stuck in survival and scarcity. All of those things are actually fueling the old models rather than fueling new models. So that's one thing I wanted to say, is learn skills of collaboration. That would be my number one thing of where to start. And the way that you learn those collaboration skills is by just giving it a go, talking to people, seeing what types of collaborative arrangements you can come up with. And Tomar's going to list a few of those in a moment. To start exercising or building that new muscle of how to cooperate with others, because it really does require the ego to step back and know its place and not bulldoze people and not have blurred boundaries about what you do versus what they do. It requires you to be receptive, as we mentioned earlier, to what creation is trying to birth through you. It's not about your agenda. All of that. And it's all new skills. And so these really are the skills of the nontrepreneur. Whereas the entrepreneurial skill set we talked about before, the nontrepreneur skill set is collaboration skills. Also, speaking from experience, I would have in your mind what can actually go wrong in collaboration. So what things to look out for. So I'll give a couple of examples. And Tomar can probably give a couple too. So one thing that I've learned from is in coming together with people, sometimes you can come together for the wrong intention. So what I mean by the wrong intention is where you haven't actually discovered what the true purpose is of you coming together. So people are on different pages, and then you find after you come together that you're not on the same page at all. So of course this is valuable experience to have, but it's also good to know that this is one of the things that can go wrong, is that you don't even form in the first place for the right reasons, or for the reasons that everyone shares. Another one is, and probably some of you have experienced this, is the imbalance in the actual teamwork process. So some people doing more work than others, and there's not that equilibrium where, you know, someone does a lot of work at one point and then someone else takes over next time, or, you know, and it happens naturally. So it took me a while to get into that groove where initially the work was being done primarily by one or a few, and then the others were slacking off or weren't given the space to step up, and reaching a point where I can work in equilibrium with someone or a team where you don't worry about how much time you're doing on something, because you know that each person is equally invested and equally skilled to pick up the tabs or pick up the work where you leave off. So they're just a couple of things to look out. So those kind of signs, I wish I knew sort of up front, but I had to learn from experience. Gillian has said, I can do collaboration easily and have been trying to make this happen for 10 years. Stepping out of an individual role because you think you can do someone else's task better. Not enough people in the team, pod or group. Okay, so there's a few comments there. Yeah, so I can relate to that. I wanted collaboration for years and years, Jill, before it actually came together. And I have to say, there is divine intervention required for people to come together. My business partner, Sarah K. Jones, and I came together because I actually had a dream that we were working together and that we both held two halves of the whole. And that's how we kind of started collaborating, and it was an amazing experience right from the start. But I've had other experiences where I've come together and it's not that way. And so it's not always within our control. All I can suggest is that you work on yourself and your own collaboration skills, and really knowing your place and your role and being able to have clear boundaries about what you do. That is a really good place to start. And also talking to lots of people, that letting them know that you're actually looking for collaboration opportunities, and perhaps, you know, some of the things that Tomar's going to say in a moment about the different practical ways you can collaborate is really helpful to know what options there are. Because sometimes it could just be that you're looking at the wrong model, you know, if you've been looking for a long time. And the only other things I just wanted to briefly touch on about where you can start now is build your industry network. Get a sense of who does what in your industry. So when you finish with a client, who are you referring them on to? Or who's referring to you and what for? So you are part of a network. So when you finish working with someone, you don't just leave them out in the ether. You pass them on to someone, and it doesn't mean they necessarily work with that person next or anything like that. It just means that you're thinking of them in terms of the whole continuum of their journey, and also giving other providers opportunities to work with your clients. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to mention there, because Tomar's going to go into more details.
That's great, Natalie. You said so many really important things. One of the skills of collaboration, from what you were describing clearly, is learning how to communicate clearly. Mm-hmm. Actually learning the skills of clear communication, of setting boundaries, of expressing what you need and what you don't like. You know, this honest and open communication, it's an art. I mean, it's definitely something that we can learn. and really being clear about what you want. What is the purpose? What is it you really desire? But it's also a process, because you don't necessarily know in the beginning. In fact, just talking to people who also want to collaborate is a great place to start. Like, you want that too? So do I. Let's talk. Maybe there's something we can do together, or maybe there's a larger group that we can form together. Uh, so I also, something occurred to me when you were first starting, and you mentioned how we don't really know how to do this yet. We're learning. This isn't something that exists yet in the world. And it occurred to me that actually what's so exciting is that it's going to evolve. It's like all we actually have to do is start taking the first steps. And this is true for each of us individually. Start taking some baby steps in the direction of collaboration. But I think also as a group, or as a culture, or however you want to describe it, we're going to start developing, just like, Natalie's concept of business family is actually embodied now because the four of us are doing it, but that isn't where it's going to end. And we have to actually have trust in this process of the emergence. And it only happens when you step into it, when you actually say yes to it and show up. That's when it happens. So some of the ways that people now already collaborate, that we can all, add or try if we're not doing it already. One of them is, well, just being part of some kind of network or community of support, where we have an opportunity to talk about what we're working on and get feedback and get suggestions, encouragement and ideas. And that can be either a paid or an unpaid kind of structure. Sometimes it's harder when it's unpaid, because groups often fall apart if there isn't someone leading them or taking responsibility for that. But something that can happen, I've been doing for about 4 years now with one partner. Every single week we meet together and mastermind. We just basically talk about what's going on in our business and what we want help with. And there are groups of 3 and 6, mastermind partnerships and groups can take different forms. It's an amazing thing. And also from those mastermind groups can come ideas for collaborating on projects, even though that's not the main purpose of it. Also, someone in my group mentioned co-working, how much support and how much relief from the isolation, and also the tendency to procrastinate or avoid what you're supposed to do, came from just sitting in a room with someone else. Who was, I call it parallel play, and it can be virtual, of course, as well. So co-working is an agreement with boundaries, with a shared purpose that you do with other people, where you are supported and where you're less alone in your business. And then there are many kinds of associations or collectives or cooperative ventures. I used to be, when I was an artist, I was in an artist-run gallery for many years, and that was a collaborative venture where we divided up the roles and we did everything ourselves. And, it's like a combination or a fusion of having your own individual purpose and having a collective that shares in a larger vision. So as an artist, we were each creating our own art. We were each having our own exhibits. But as a gallery, we were also invested in having an existence in the world and meaning, representing something in the world and getting attention for the larger entity that was the gallery. And it was a wonderful, created many wonderful opportunities for everybody. Similarly, things like magazines or publishing ventures or schools with a faculty, and of course what we're going to be doing, membership communities, teaching and training. So there are different ways that you can come together to where you have, it's kind of a hybrid of you still have your solo business, but you're not doing it alone. So there's 2 different things here, I believe, that are different steps. One is I'm still having my solo business, but how can I participate? Like Natalie was saying about the ecosystem, knowing that I'm part of a larger community of other service providers, and even to think about my clients in a larger context. It's not like my responsibility ends when my little tour of duty with them is over. Like, do I have a bigger vision for what they need and what could support them that includes people that I've hand selected as being of, similar value and quality?
Yeah.
So that's a kind of being a solo business, but in a larger context. And that's a form of collaboration, or, as I was saying, just having a partner, having a buddy, having a mastermind, or a co-working partner. But then, of course, on the next level is actually having a non-solo business, actually joining forces with a business partner or a business family. As Natalie said, a business family doesn't have to be about making money. It's not essentially about that, but it can develop into a business, as it is for us. So there, we are creating a business, but it's not a solo business, And there are many. I've seen many examples of people who have both a private solo business, which they're known for, and a shared business or a project or a class or a series of classes that they teach with a partner. And it's so the synergy of working with a partner, the support you get, the way you keep each other motivated, the way you share the responsibilities so everything isn't on you, is, even if it's just one part of your business life, it can make a huge, huge difference in just how you feel nourished and excited and energized. I think that is one of the key things, is how energizing it is as well. There's just so many different aspects and benefits of working in these different permutations, that it doesn't have to just be, it's me reinventing the wheel. It's me with one more website and one more podcast and one more, it's all these different things that people are taught to do and told they have to do as a solopreneur, which, if we could somehow even join forces and share some of the resources, it would make a difference in our lives. So,
yes. Can I add something to that, Tomar? Something that's just came to me while you were talking. One of the other skills in collaboration is actually being receptivity. Not coming across as like you have it all, or you know everything, or if people see you as already successful, they're not going to go, oh, well, she's up for collaboration. So there's this, it's like a real opening of the heart. And that's what my experience of it was, that kind of the element of mystery or divine intervention, if you like, where, my heart had to open and surrender to collaboration in order for it to work. And that's a nice little nugget to finish on, perhaps.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's happening as people are awakening to new possibilities and we're receiving inspirations from the future, so to speak, is that as we start to have the courage and the vulnerability to share what's really on our heart, talking about things like, I just don't know how to do it as a solo entrepreneur, or whatever it is, I feel like my soul work is not really there yet. When we start to share from our heart what we're longing for and what doesn't feel like it's there yet, it opens the door for other people to be vulnerable and other people to, you too, I've been feeling the same way, but I didn't know who to talk to. No one admits to these things. And that's, part of the culture we're in, of having to look like we all have it all together. So Natalie has said that relationship is the currency of the future, and it takes a village to grow a business. my guides say, to whatever degree your medicine will benefit the world, it will do so as a result of your networks of support among a healthy community of peers. There is no health in isolation. Alone, the plant withers and dies. So in Tao, we hope to provide a fertile ground for the development of soul work and for the exploration of many different forms of collaboration.
And next week, this kind of flows into our third topic, which is how do we succeed if we're not motivated by money? So really, we're going to be taking all of this a step further next week, because we still have to have a livelihood. And through the lenses, or the perspectives of living our soul work and collaboration, how can we make money? So, yeah.
And that's a topic no one talks about, not being motivated by money.
Yeah, that's right.
I never heard anyone say those words before I met you, Natalie.
Yeah. It took me ages to figure it out. I was always wondering what was wrong with me. Anyway, we really are so grateful that you could join us today. It's lovely to have some of you from the last call on this one as well. So we hope you'll join us next week, same time next week, for our third call.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And those of you who are listening on the recording, watching on the recording, please reach out and stay connected. We're going forward together.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you for your comments. We'll read them later, because we kind of got carried away and get to read them in live on the chat. So see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.